Welcome to Answers for Living. We are looking at the subject, how can we impress God? And we're looking at this subject through the eyes of James, especially through what James wrote in James chapter 1, verse 26 to 27. One thing we need to understand is that Satan is a deceiver, and he delights in getting people to think they can impress God so much that God would let them into heaven because they've been so good or they've done so many good things that he really can't send them to any place else. He's got to let them into heaven. Satan tries to convince us that God is impressed with all of our religious activity. Let me give you a list. He sees our good works. He sees our worship. He hears the songs we sing. He sees the amount of money that we give. He observes our taking of communion. He watches us with delight at our baptisms. He notices who teaches Sunday school. He notices how many people are in each class every year. He takes a look at home Bible studies and how many people come and listen and learn. He follows our mission trips. He counts the 5-gallon buckets of cleaning supplies that we sent and the emergency cash we sent to help people who had need because of a hurricane. Now, all these things are good things to do, and God does notice these things, and He will reward us for doing some of these things, but is God impressed? James says, don't let Satan lie to you. And he shows us what impresses God. Listen to what it says. Those who consider themselves religious, and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues, deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Now, before we look deeply into the text, I want you to understand something. James is not talking about salvation. He is not saying if you don't control your tongue, your salvation is worthless. He is not saying if you don't take care of the orphans and the widows, you're going to lose your salvation. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For by grace are we saved through faith, and that not of ourselves, it's a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast." Salvation is a gift. It is based solely on God's grace. It's received by faith. It is not earned. It can't be bought. It isn't even kept by being good or by doing good. Every person who enters heaven will be in heaven because of God's grace. Rewards for how we live, for deeds that we did in Jesus' name, for service that we rendered to the poor and the helpless, for words of comfort that we spoke to someone, they will be rewarded. If God is pleased with something that we do, He will reward us for pleasing Him. James is not talking about salvation. He's talking about what pleases or displeases the Lord.